Okay, so our panelists are Ben Griffiths, Director of Digital Solutions from Analysys Mason, and Nenad Bozic, data enthusiast, entrepreneur, and the founder and the CEO of the company SmartCat from Serbia. Analysys Mason is the world's leading management consultancy focused on TMT, a critical enabler of economic, environmental, and social transformation. Nenad is an entrepreneur, ex-software engineer with more than 10 years of experience in the fields of data and AI. So SmartCat is an old friend of Data Science Conference, and we're sure that like many attendees know a lot about your company. But like, can you first tell us a bit about yourself and your company, maybe?
Yeah, definitely. So, as you said, we are all friends. I remember 6 years ago speaking here. So from that point on, where we were mostly technical, we came a long way of being strategical advisors. And this is how we met Analysys Mason. They are in the process of digitalizing and optimizing all of their processes. And we think we can help a lot building data tools needed for their jobs to be smoother, better, and they can then probably create more impact with those tools.
And Ben, as a start, maybe a few words about yourself and the company.
Yeah, sure. So I've been with the company getting on for 20 years now. So I started off answering the phones on the help desk and have gone through the various roles in the IT function and landed up as director. The company's got two main arms. We're a combination of a consulting and a research house. So we have super smart analysts who go out and look at emerging technologies and write white papers about that our clients subscribe to. Some of them subscribe to complex data sets as well in telecoms metrics, for example. And then on the consulting side, it's more like a short-term engagements, so kind of 6 to 8 week strategic engagements with clients to see how they can implement those emerging technologies and monetize them in the future.
Okay, so Ben, why did you create and implement data strategy? I mean, was this like a necessity, or did you have like a clear vision what you wanted to achieve?
I'd love to say it was the second, and it was a clear vision, but I think it was more organic than that. It was something that kind of bubbled up to the surface, and we realized that we needed to rethink the way we were handling data. So the way we came to Nenad and SmartCat was using this data tool that I talked about before. So Data Hub is a product where clients can subscribe to it and get, say, all these fabulous metrics about the telecoms industry and various other industries, and we were looking to expand that data set quite dramatically. And the engine that we had that ran that wasn't up to the job. It was designed for a much smaller data set than we were using. We initially talked to a partner company called Vega, based in Novi Sad. Talked to them, and they recommended Nenad and his team to start working on what was initially a very specific data project. So we weren't looking at that point as data strategy, we were looking to solve a data problem. At the same time, our business has been going through a growth period, so we're looking at ways that we can modernize and optimize our business processes. So things that were fit for a small company don't scale up, and increasingly the key to that effective scaling of those business processes is understanding the underlying data. And through conversations with Nenad and his team, it became apparent that we could, by changing our approach and looking at this underlying data behind our business processes, we could take out a lot of the manual processing. So rather than having to go and find data, if it's there front and center in front of people, they can make smart decisions much more quickly. So it kind of snowballed. So it wasn't that we took a step and sat down one day and thought, right, we need to come up with a data strategy. It's something that's evolved and has permeated through pretty much all the areas of the business.
Maybe you can share some other challenges that you first experienced when you started working on it?
Yeah, I'd say our biggest challenge is probably the same with any big project, is trying to fit it alongside the day job. So we're trying to use data to make people's day jobs easier, so getting that data ready for them. But in order to get access to, or to even identify what that data is, people need to take a step back from that and think about what they're doing and maybe reassess the way that they're doing it. And it's equivalent to trying to service a car while you're driving it, right? You're constantly trying to change what you're doing, but keeping the day-to-day business going on. So I think that was probably our biggest challenge was being able to take a step back and take a breather and reassess the way we were doing things without everything just stopping in the short term.
A question for Nenad, because SmartCat is a data company. So how does creating a data strategy looks from the perspective of a data company?
Yeah, I mean, at first we didn't realize that we need to be involved at that step of the process. Usually people come to us when they have a problem, and then we had all the processes to understand the problem and implement it the best possible ways. But what we are is a curious bunch of developers, and we asked more and more questions, and we realized that we can do the work much more efficiently if we understand the whole roadmap, not only one piece of the puzzle. And this is how we came to the data strategy workshop. We created a 1 or 2 week process where we first do the discovery phase, understand as much as we can about the business, but also understand the technical level of development of the company. And we tried together with our client to match those two, business problems and technical excellence, in order to create some kind of roadmap where data products can be introduced more and more into processes. So whole business of our clients is easier when they have automated tools.
If I could just jump in there, one thing that ties back to your question to me around the challenges is that workshop process, I think, is invaluable in giving people that space to think about what the problem is, and also to prioritize it and create a roadmap. So you can take it then from being something that's too big of a task, and you've got so many different things going on, that being able to take a step back and say, okay, we know we're at point A and we want to get to point B. And if we do this along the way, then we've got a series of small tasks instead of something that's just too big to even get a handle on.
We learned it, I think, the hard way. Huge portion of our company is AI, and this is a whole new field where everybody comes with expectations. And back then, we just did the project, and probably management of expectation was not in our focus. And then we figured that we can spend a week or 2 weeks, which is short period of time, to understand what we are building on both ends, to manage both expectations much better, because it's essentially R&D area still, even though we are in 7th year of this conference.
And what would you tell? What are the most important parts of a good and effective data strategy?
What Ben said is certainly a big portion, to chunk it up into small manageable portions. And I would say the other thing is to talk about success criteria of each chunk, because you need to get buy-in from stakeholders. In order to get buy-in, you need to present some kind of results that you created with a small chunk. Second portion, which we are slowly getting to in Analysys Mason, is people change. When you implement all the tools, this is what we in SmartCat can impact. We can create tools, but then there is whole change in the organization, processes, who has access to the data, how, who is the body in the organization that will tell this data you can access. This is not something that we plan for another 3 years. I think that is important, and that is what comes after tooling, and that is huge change. Maybe it's better question for Ben. I think you have it in your agenda.
Yeah, no, I'd completely agree with that, and it's managing change, and as well, people don't always want the data to be surfaced, so we're looking at changing business processes, so people can be quite happy hiding behind the fact that they never bother doing timesheets, or they never do some other admin task that they do, and we're trying to give them a gentle nudge, shall we say, in order to complete those things and to take the mental pressure off having to remember to do them, and people can be a little bit wary sometimes of having that data surfaced. And then the other change aspect, I think that there's always a fear with people and I think this is true of any organization, there's a fear when you start streamlining processes and automating processes. People think, well, is this going to do me out of a job? Is this going to mean that if I'm not spending like my working day filling out some spreadsheet that I've always filled in, what are they going to find for me? And it goes back to what Nenad was saying about the success criteria and feeding back to people what the wins are. So you find this person who's spent 5 years filling out a particular spreadsheet, they suddenly find that their job's completely changed but been enriched because they're able to do something more valuable to the company and better recognized from it. But it's getting people to understand that there's that journey and also to buy into it. And it becomes much easier the further on you go through the process. So you find that the first processes or teams that you hit are kind of reticent, and then as people start seeing it and seeing, oh well, this person's doing a much easier job than they were doing, maybe the same applies to me. So it's that showing people what the benefits are and showing them what's possible and how they're going to be a more valuable asset to the business rather than just being somebody turning a handle.
You already mentioned the cultural aspect, so maybe making sure some experiences there, like how do you inspire and nurture cultural changes within the company when you become more data-driven as a company?
I think it's always important to explain the purpose why you are doing something. If you say today we are not using spreadsheets, but you will do this thing, then you're removing huge portion of the whole reason. But if you explain that maybe if you manage to free up some time, creative time of people who can then do much more creative work, then it's a much better explanation why you are doing something, and probably you will have much bigger adoption of changing the way you work. Also, I believe that repetitive work is something that machines can do, but not to replace people, but to free up time for creative work. So I think this is really important to say.
I completely agree with that. And again, going back to that people management side of things, I think it's from the part of the business I work in. So we're trying to help people do their job better, but we're not the experts in their job. So it can be treading a fine line sometimes in saying, I'm not saying I know how to do this better than you, but consider doing it this way and let's work together. And the more buy-in you've got from the people that are helping create the process, the more valuable it is. Because I think if I don't know, if I went to our data team and told them, hey, this is everything I know about data strategy, this is how to do it, then I'd get tremendous pushback. So it's getting them involved in it and feeling like they're part of the process and part of the new world is a much more efficient way or much more effective way of getting change to happen.
Maybe one more question for both, the question on leadership, whose job is to lead this transformation? Is it always the CEO, or are there some other important technical leaders within the company who are responsible for the leadership?
I'll answer to start and then jump in, but I think it's there's a couple of different areas in a way. So the whole change is coming from the top, so coming from leadership positions, but the actual manifestation of that change is coming through our team effectively, and it goes back to this point of not trying to dictate to people how things should go, but trying to kind of handhold people through the process and to make them feel comfortable through the process. So it's a leadership with a lowercase L, right? It's not standing up there and banging the drum and saying you need to do this. It's trying to get people engaged in the process.
Yeah, I have two aspects: implementing data strategy on us and providing it as a service. So in the first aspect, I think it goes, as Ben said, top down, but not top down to impose some kind of strategy. Probably leadership team will create a vision, and then action points will go down and down and down. Everybody will have autonomy to develop portions which will end up as piece of overall strategy. When we are providing service, we have a dedicated team, business development team, which is sitting together with our customers, and our role in that cooperation is to understand the business, but be the technical voice there if some decision makes sense, if some other option is better, if something cannot be implemented, then you will spend a lot of time, money, whatever, doing it. Maybe there is a different way, buy and build strategies, etc., etc. So in that engagements, we are trying to be technical voice and really follow through what customer wants for their business, because they know better, the best their business.
And there's the case when like you implement the data strategy and then like certain procedures change. So like maybe you can tell a few words on that. Like there are certain processes and procedures, and then like after a certain like.
Yeah, and I think that going back to my point about there being leadership from the top, but not imposing the way it's going to be done. To give an example of what I mean there, the leadership may not, or leadership team may not actually know that what they're doing is about data. So we have a mandate, for example, to improve business processes, and that's what is seen as a business objective. The implementation of that is about the data strategy. So recognizing that in order to improve business processes, you need to surface the data and have it available for everybody. So there's not an implicit direction and not a recognition at the top to say, yes, we need a data strategy to do this. It's embedded in everything you do. The thing that's becoming more and more apparent the more that I'm working with Nenad and his team is that data is everything. So there's not a single business process I can think of where there isn't an impact of being able to use the data better. And I think that's. We had a conversation on the way here from Novi Sad this morning and probably came up with another 2 possible projects that you can run. This is a great salesman. But it's, there's always these various ideas cropping up, and it's not so much a case of standing at the top and thinking, I'm going to use data in this way. It just naturally evolves and
Yep.
turns up in your business strategy. So I wouldn't say there's a business strategy and a data strategy. I think they're one and the same.
But there is one risky area where business expects business results and they don't see the technical implementation. There is area of adoption inside the company where probably things will go slower before they start going faster. And this is the risky area. Everybody is used to certain pace, for example, when you centralize data in data lake, there is data governance process where new body in the company is responsible for exposing data, and this body will get requests from everybody, from each department, and then they will stack their priority, and now all of a sudden when you're a sales guy, you cannot go to the other department to ask for data. You need to go through certain process, and this can take a while, and then people will complain, and then you will have people management instead of so tech is, I would say, the easier part of it. I think organizational change is big portion of it.
And one more question, like for companies that haven't gone through any of this, like what would be like your recommendation or like a first step? What, like a company that is more traditional and doesn't have any data strategy developed, what should they focus on first?
I think it's a cliche, but the adage about a journey of 1,000 miles beginning with a single step is very true here. I think if you spend too long trying to think about perfection and trying to solve the whole data problem all in one go, it's too overwhelming of a problem. So I think it's a case that you need to just jump in, get started, and almost accept that it's a bit of a leap of faith. So you might not know exactly how you're going to get there and what you're going to do, but as soon as you start making those decisions, it suddenly starts bubbling up more and more relevant business problems that you can solve in the same way. So I think it's definitely a case that you should just take the bull by the horns and get started with it rather than waiting for a perfect opportunity. Because at the end of the day, business never stops, right? You've always got everything going on, all your normal business operations, and if you're waiting for a quiet time. So I've been with the company 20 years and I don't think I've ever had a quiet time since I started. So there's never a time where you've got the luxury of just sitting back and thinking, I'm going to really think about things here. You're always trying to run to keep up.
Yeah, I would say premature automation is also something that can happen. Data strategy to me is about automating certain decision making using tools. But if you start automating everything, you will spend more time developing stuff than actually using it. So there is a portion of equation where you need to sit down and do your math, whether it is worth it or not, because this is investment. And investment needs to happen when it makes sense to make an investment, when you are slow, when your communication is not good, when you don't see good decisions from a bunch of factors. So I would say maybe practical device can be organized portion of your time, whether monthly, whether weekly, to think about things that are happening in your organization and try to think whether it can be done faster, better. Try to find out peers from similar companies or maybe bigger companies and talk with them what they have implemented, and maybe grab some ideas, because everybody is thinking in this direction. So maybe those two.
I think that ties in actually with that point about jumping in, because I think it's very hard to take an objective view and think about all the areas where things are possible, and certainly amongst people in business functions that aren't necessarily as technically focused. It's only when people start seeing the results elsewhere in other areas of the business that they start thinking, oh, wait a minute, this could work for me, I could do this, I could do that. So to try and just start with a blank piece of paper and write down everything isn't ever going to work. You need to start getting involved and getting your hands dirty and then find out what's possible from there.
And probably there is always someone who will push for this, and probably you will get rejected in the company because you will get pushback from business because it's an investment. You will get pushback from people because you're automating the portions of their jobs. But if you try 1, 2, 3 times, third idea maybe will go through, and then, as Ben says, when you see results, it will become easier to convince everybody that this is the road.
Thank you. We have several minutes left for the audience, so we have 1, 2 for now.
Hi, thanks for your talk. It was really interesting. One question is for you, sorry, Nenad. You mentioned that data strategy for you is automating processes, but what if portion of process? Okay, but what if portion of business strategy doesn't include the necessity for automatizing stuff? What would in that context be a data strategy?
Using the data to gather insight to lead the business better. Maybe I didn't say it right. Automating is a portion of data strategy, but for me, moving away from hunches and gut feeling that something is a good decision, but really using data to prove that certain decision will work for you is essence of data strategy for me.
Okay, and one more quick question. On average, how long does these endeavors last in your experience? So from ideation of data strategy, identification of the necessity, up until some point where you say, okay, this now works.
I think I agree with Ben that this is never-ending story, but I guess you need maybe a month to think about a sound order of steps how to do things, and then it's depending on the size of the organization, but taking usually companies when they are growing from, I don't know, 50 to 100 people or customers or whatever, they see a bottleneck of not one guy has a gut feeling to do the decision, but you need aid tool or something. I would say a couple of months. I think in a couple of months you can create some kind of impact result to prove that making data-driven decision is much better and pays more than gut feeling decisions.
Okay, and another one, if I may. Is business glossary and data catalog something that you do in the start, or is it a necessity?
I think it is. Sometimes we do it, sometimes we don't do it. For example, with Analysys Mason, we talked a lot with one of the researchers, and she was using her vocabulary. And for example, for her, security was multi-tenancy. And for us, security was security of whole system. So I think finding a right vocabulary is really important, especially if you talk about us and the customer. And for example, customer is only getting to dive into data world. And for us, data is first class citizen in our organization. Getting to the same level of talking to each other is a big portion of successful implementation.
Okay.
Just to jump in, I'd agree with that in terms of the data definition and glossary being very important, just from our side. So taking back to that example of having one data set and adding another huge data set, there was overlap between the two, but we needed to ensure that the terms matched up. So if you take telco's data that was talking about an SMB organization or an enterprise organization, for you to be able to make meaningful comparisons across the data, you need to make sure that you're using the same metrics across everything. So there's that element of making sure that everybody's talking about the same thing. And I think it's something that general business discourse kind of hides. So when you're talking amongst yourselves, it's okay to know that an SMB is roughly this big, or roughly an enterprise is roughly that big. But it's when you're taking it to the next level of data analysis, you need to have that kind of really formalized, shared understanding of what the data is.
A question. So maybe one for Nenad and one for Ben. So for Nenad, like in your experience, what are there any like starting points? Are there any quick wins that you can say, okay, you know, I know this works, and if I go with this is gonna, you know, this is gonna be a killer. And maybe then for Ben, in your experience, what were the quick wins? What did you start with? How did you convince the higher ups or the organization to say, yes, that's it, let's continue? What are these first steps?
Maybe a lot of our customers are coming with some kind of digital product, and either it is online shop or analytics tool or whatever, and usually you have transactional data, but usually you don't think about splitting transactional with usually you have transactional and analytics data in the same place, and they want to get insight, do analytics. Quick win and something that always works is splitting those two somehow. Because what a lot of customers do is do analytics on transactional data, then kill transactional application because analytics queries are heavy, slow, etc., etc. So this is usually a first step in order to get quality, because when you build first report, then you want 50 more reports, because you all of a sudden you see data, and when you start building the reports, then things become heavy on I don't know if I answered your question, but I see this as pattern, at least us working with our clients.
Yeah, I think for us the buy-in from the higher ups was relatively easy in this case, because it had quite a clearly defined objective. So that's our initial challenge was rebuilding this engine so it could support the rest of the data. So that bit was quite straightforward. I think in terms of getting buy-in from people, it goes back to this gentleman's question about automation. Actually, I think automation is a funny word. I think automation exists throughout the whole process, and it's not business process automation necessarily. It's automation of getting access to the data. So surfacing the data is probably a better way to do it. And I think what we saw is that once you start surfacing that data and kind of giving it to people, and you can almost do that part blind. So I could give a load of marketing data to my marketing department. I don't know what it means. It's not my job to know what it means. But I can hand it over to them and say, you've got all this data to get together in one place, and then they can start joining the dots up and making useful inferences from that data. So I think being able to hand it over to people like that is really important, and kind of trusting them to have the smarts to know their area of expertise behind the scenes to join it up. And we found that people are really keen on that once they can see what they've got and move away from having a PDF report that lives over here and a PDF report that lives over here that never get joined together. Once they're tied in, it becomes much more powerful.
We might have like a few more questions, a few more seconds for a question if anyone is interested. If not, I would thank you both Ben and Nenad.
Thank you.